Now it's time to move on to the next technical session. And I'm here to inform you that there is a change in the technical section that I mentioned earlier. Let me read out the session once. First technical session is between 12 to 1, but we are running out of time. And it is headed by Neha Arora, Assistant Professor of English, Central University of Rajasthan, India. And the second technical session is between 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. is headed by Dr. Prasenjit Pandey, Assistant Professor, Department of English and Foreign Language, Chhattisgarh. And the third technical session is between 3 p.m. to 4 p.m. headed by Dr. Taraf Shah, Assistant Professor, Department of English, University of Jammu, India. And finally, there is an additional technical session between 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. headed by Dr. Vibha Wood, Assistant Professor, Department of English, JNV University, Jaipur. And now I invite Dr. Neha Arora, Assistant Professor of English, Central University of Rajasthan, to take over the session. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you. Very good afternoon to everyone. Just want to check whether I'm clearly audible.
Yes, ma'am, you are.
Okay. So thank you, the organizers, for inviting me, for having me here to chair the session. And yes, we are running out of time. So just want to check with Cheryl. Now I think the session would be till 1:30, or would we have to curtail it within half an hour?
Ma'am, sir will inform you about that, ma'am. I'm not sure about
Yes,
it.
sir.
Over
Yeah.
to sir.
Because it was an hour session, 12 to 1. Now it's almost 12:27. So could you please, accordingly, I'll inform the participants and I'll manage the time also.
Yes, ma'am, 1 second. So can you please clear the doubt? Amal, sir. Ma'am, 1 second, ma'am. Let me check and let you know soon.
Yeah, sure, sure. In the meanwhile, I just want to check the participants. Do we have Lisa Pavitran here?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, yeah. Chitra Soman?
Yes, ma'am, here.
Okay, okay. Kavaljit Kaur and Dr. Lakhvinder Kaur?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, fine. T.S. Srikala?
Yes, ma'am. I'm here.
Yeah, and Charlie C. We have the fifth, the last one, Charlie C. And that means we have four presentations as of now. Once we get the green signal from the organizers, because I do understand that when we prepare the presentations, papers, so we want proper time to be given to us, and that's why I just asked the organizers to clear this doubt. So let them get back.
Ma'am, excuse me, ma'am.
Yeah,
It will
sure.
be convenient if you cut short your presentation within 10 minutes, ma'am. So that we'll...
All right. So there are four presenters. So 10 minutes each, because the fifth one is not present as of now. So 10 minutes each, and then followed by the doubt clearing session and question answers. So we won't stop in between. We'll take the presentations first, and then after the session, after all the presentations have been done, then we'll take the question answers. Right?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So you all must have heard what the organizers have said. So it is my request not to spill over the time. It's 12:30 and 10 minutes each, and I'll be managing the time. So kindly stick to the time, right? All right. With this, I invite our first presenter, Lisa Pavitran. She's an assistant professor at KSMDB College, Kerala. And the topic of her work is challenging the Cartesian nature and or cultural dichotomy, a post-colonial eco-critical reading of Uduru Nunaku's selected poems. So something of my interest. So I welcome you, Lisa. Please.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Good afternoon, one and all. The topic for my presentation is Challenging the Cartesian Nature-Culture Dichotomy, a post-colonial eco-critical reading of Udguru Nunical's selected poems. A dualism between nature and culture is the assumption that humans are not an inherent part of nature, since they have particular qualities that set them apart from non humans. And in Western thought, nature has tended to be understood as dualistically opposed to culture or humanity. Nature is considered as those places or parts that are unaffected by people. This way of dividing up the world positions humans as fundamentally outside nature. In the words of the environmental historian William Cronin, the place where we are is a place where nature is not. According to the Cartesian view, culture and nature are opposite sides in a dualism in which culture as an agent actively strives for domination over nature, and nature as a source of hardships has to be mastered by human rational action. The nature culture dualism is a product of the very particular cultural history of the West. The ecofeminist philosopher Walt Plumwood has called the nature culture dualism, I quote, the foundational delusion of the West, unquote, and has argued that it is a dangerous doctrine strongly implicated in the environmental crisis. It turns out, however, that many other cultures did not divide the world up in this way. For the native people of all lands, culture and nature did not represent two forces opposing each other, but as entities that together form a unity. In the pre-colonial era, the Aboriginal community in Australia lived in close union with nature, consuming and conserving the biodiversity of their land. They believed that land was a spirit evoked a sense of awe and reverence to nature, and this belief helped to preserve the purity of nature. The rupture of a singular and conscious dwelling space to multiple disregarded places of economic and ecological sites is a consequence of the civilizing mission in Australia by the whites. Colonization paved way not only for political and social domination, but also cultural imperialism and environmental exploitation. It ignored the Aboriginal understanding of sustainable development and ecological balance. Instead, imposed the Western understanding of development, which equated nature as a mere resource to be used and overused. Ujiro Nunakal is an Australian Aboriginal writer and a political activist, and she is considered as the first of the Aboriginal protest writers. Her first volume of poetry, We Are Blowing, published in 1964, is the first book by an Aboriginal woman to be published. And she was a member of the Nunakal tribe. And in many of her poems, Ujiro depicts the Aboriginals as victims of colonization and the fatal changes it brought to them. This paper attempts to explore the intricate relationship of the Aboriginal community with nature through a post-colonial eco-critical reading of her two poems, We Are Growing and Dreamtime. The paper also looks upon different roles placed by nature, which highlight the emotional and physical importance of ecosystem and the people. Her poem, We Are Growing, is centered around the theme of Aboriginal oppression and dispossession of land. The opening lines tell much about the miserable living conditions of the people who were once the native inhabitants of the land and are now suffering from displacement and poverty which is reflected in the word semi-naked. Moreover, these lines, a semi-naked, I quote, a semi-naked band, subdued and silent, indicate the colonial oppression. The dispossession of their land has precipitated the loss of their cultural identity. The Aboriginals had come to their native land to see for the last time their sacred Bora ground. A Bora ring is a sacred circle of ground where certain initiation ceremonies are performed. They were shocked to see that their sacred ground was desecrated and not respected because it was changed to a white residential area. Their shock was worsened when they discovered that this Bora ground has been turned into a waste collection point. A board was erected there and it read, Rubbish may be tipped here. When the whites appropriated the indigenous lands, they not only considered it as a resource and a commodity, but also a junkyard of the West. The waste collection point near the old Bora ring challenges and violates the sanctity of nature as well as the honor of their land. This instance of othering of nature exposes the colonial attitude towards post-colonial lands, which, according to the whites, were terra nullis, land belonging to no one. They are emotionally confused to realize that they are now strangers in their land because of the white colonizers. Ujaro links the dispossession of the land to the erasure of their old traditional rituals and ceremonies. Losing land for the Aboriginals has resulted in a loss of their heritage and culture because they were so deeply connected with it. Land strongly reflects the social, economic, political, and cultural links that the Aboriginal people have. In an enthusiastic speech delivered in 1979 in the Australian National University, Ujaro stated that in the traditional society, each group of Aborigines has a close and permanent relationship to a clearly defined tract of land. This land was not only their source of livelihood, it was also their spiritual center, the land of their ancestors, and the source of their social cohesion. Though these Aboriginals cannot articulate their true feelings and thoughts, they still have some strong sense of belonging to the land. I quote, "We belong here, we are of the old ways, we are the Corroboree and the Bora ground." Unquote. The Corroboree is a nocturnal festivity with songs and symbolic dances by which the Australian Aborigines celebrate their culture and pass along the stories of their history to ensure that future generations will be educated in their own traditional way of life. And in the poem, the repeated use of the pronoun we reveals a desire by Ujiro to be the speaker and the voice of her culturally dislocated people. She is adopting here a collective voice of the surviving Aboriginals who struggle to sustain their traditional ways. She also voices out the pains of the disappearance and vanishing of the traditional way of life with all of its cultural connotations. I quote from the poem: "The scrubs are gone, the hunting and the laughter, the eagle is gone, the emu and the kangaroo are gone from this place." Unquote. The dispossession of land by white man has also caused the destruction of the natural environment. The two traditional symbols associated with Australia, the emu and the kangaroo, are no longer extant now because the white man caused irreparable destruction to the Aboriginal nature. As the native lands, animals, and sacred sites are gone, the Aboriginals realize that they themselves are doomed to annihilation. The poem ends with a sad declaration of the forced withdrawal stressed in the line, "And we are going." The second poem, Dreamtime, Ujaro Munikal, selects quite a simple title, which is Dream.
Lisa, just 2 minutes and wind up in 2-3 minutes.
They believe that the dream time was way back. The land and the people. They believe that according to their belief, the land and the people were created by spirits, and the spirits made rivers, streams, lands, hills, and all those things. And it is believed that the spirits gave them their hunting tools also, and each tribe the spirits have given them the land, and also their dreaming. They also instruct people which places are sacred, and they perform. And accordingly, the Aboriginals perform ritual ceremonies and customary songs near the sacred sites to please the ancestral spirits and to keep themselves alive. So this essentially this poem talks about the disappointment and the sadness that the Aboriginals felt in the context of civilization. And the invaders here is the European people who came to the land for the gold rush mission, as they found out many gold mines there. And the flow of immigrants and some great gold discoveries boost their economic growth and change the social structure. In this effect of this rapid development, the Aboriginal peoples were forcibly evicted from their homeland. And they consider themselves as the real owner of the Australian land. And here, the poet seemingly wants to emphasize the inner depression felt by the Aboriginals at that time. And this poem also shows us a strong relationship between the Aborigines themselves with their nature. And equally, we can see that they stick on to their own traditions since childhood, and they are certain that from one generation to the other. They learn that nature is the mother of life, so that they have to protect and preserve it. When they destroy the nature, they automatically lose their existence or their identity. Here also, we can see that the poet has used we instead of I. It underlines that the poem does not talk about the individual person, but it talks about the whole group of Aboriginal people themselves. And here in this poem, the main attention of the speaker, or our attention is invited to the ancestor spirit of the Aboriginal people, and these people, they want to see their ancestor to shed their grievances. They really wanted to change the condition of their race by praying to their ancestor, and they hope that their ancestor can lead them on to a happy life and lead them to a better place. And this poem also emphasizes the unfair treatment faced by the Aboriginal people, that their land has been taken away from them and they have no right at all of their motherland. So in these two poems, we see that the poet perceives Aboriginal identity as cumulative of tradition and land, and she vociferously establishes a reciprocal relationship between nature and culture. And ma'am, do I have time?
It's already 12:41, but if you want, I can give you one more minute to wind up.
These forms, not only the ecological destruction is exposed, but also the past where mutual interdependence was the underlying principle of the Aboriginal lives. And the poet has expressed grievances and concerns over people, the racial discrimination, subjugation, exploitation, inequality, loss of identity, and also the dispossession of their land and the destruction of their environment. And she laments and mourns the cultural dislocation of her people and the discontinuity and the decline of their spiritual beliefs and the traditional practices due to their displacement from their lands. And Ujjaro, we should say that Ujjaro is fully aware of her responsibility as an Aboriginal spokeswoman, and she uses her poetry as a means of protest against all forms of colonial injustices and ills. And she is proud of being a representative of her region, being a protest poet. She says that I'm dead the day I stop protesting. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lisa. It was a wonderful paper, and thank you for maintaining the time also. And I'll get back to your paper just after we are done with all the papers. So as I've jotted down, as you can see in the chat box, people liked your paper a lot, and it's very necessary to talk about this dualism or non-dualism, whether there is a boundary between nature and culture, and how the colonization has affected the mindset of the erstwhile colonized, and that we have started imbibing their theory of the dualism. Whether in fact in our culture, in the Eastern culture, there was nature and culture were never separate. So thank you so very much. Now I call upon the second presenter, Chitra Soman.
Yes, ma'am.
She's a research scholar at Nurul Islam Center for Higher Education, Tamil Nadu, and her paper is on tracing the post-colonial emergence of Black mothers in Lalita Tadami's Cane River. So,
Yes.
Chitra, welcome.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you. Dignified chair and all other delegates here. My paper is actually an attempt made on the tracing out of post-colonial emergence of motherhood in the writings of Lalita Tadamis, especially based on her work, Cane River. Actually, before introducing the paper, Cane River is actually an historical fiction, which is partly on account of all the personal lives of the author Lalita Tadavi. It is actually her, in one way, we can call it as her biographical tale, where all her ancestors has been traced out and their life has been studied with the thorough documents diaries, paper cards, then even government documents, auction tales, and receipts of the slave period. Everything has been accounted for studying this work. It's a magnanimous work done by Lalita Academy. Give me an introduction first. Afro-American writers have initially written the tales of mother as the triumph of resistance and struggles for women at the time of slavery. It has emerged as the autobiography of a slave who is either run away or freed. These autobiographical writings are chiefly a mother's claim for the birthright of a child. Harriet Jacob is one of the pioneers among slave narrators. Her work, Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl, give the original account of a slave life, and it has also become instrumental in creating the distinctive genre of Afro-American writing called slave writings. Likewise, the famous speech of Sojourner Truth proclaims, "Ain't I a woman?" witnessed the daring attempts of a slave trying to seek an opportunity to voice out their realities. Among them, the fierce tale of slavery where mother became the martyr of own child, though it is received harsh criticism, condemning the act of a mother. This has become the political stand of a black community. In Jubilee, Walker too explains the same situation of a child who undergoes the harsh conditions of slavery and has finally emerged from the struggle. Maya Angelou's I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings speaks of her lineage evolved out of slavery and how these experiences strengthened the identity of black females. Mothers are the integral part of his slave tales. These tales have fiercely expressed the realities of maternal practices at the time of slavery. They have similar narrative themes of bloodshed, abomination, fissures in the bond of mother and child, either through action or death. Violence on women's bodies is the predominant motive of these slave tales, and it makes them infamous also. Cane River differentiates from other slave tales in its unique treatment of slavery and tracing out of the history where these mothers has actually benefited from the slavery. The role of mothers imparting the resistance in the historical time of slavery is one of the prominent act of mothers during the historical time of slavery. But in the chain of Cane River, these mothers actually we can see that they are not only resisting what has actually happened at the time of slavery, but they are actually reformed. They actually utilized the slavery for their further growth and progress. And when they freed at the time when the government has declared the historical proclamation of the emancipation, these mothers are literally free, owning land, children, and family. This is one of the greatest triumphs from the slave mothers. Cane River 2001 by Lalita Academy tells this bond of families at the crucial time of historical called era called slavery and on the further historical eras of the American history. It is also a differentiated tale of slavery enriched with positive feelings that cause us to eradicate a thought that American history is not just a timeline of hatred, but it can also be a motivational spirit for the mankind to have a family, irrespective of bitter socio-political circumstances. All external threats can be our welfare system if it is handled through the maternal traits of our ancestors. Unlike all narratives where maternal ancestry fought with racism, sexual threats, and oppression by the means of violence, in Cane River, maternal ancestors adopted a different approach to preserve family. They channelized their sexuality to preserve family life, and to great extent, mothers in Cane River succeeded in bringing up their family together and also make white masters obedient to the wishes of their lives once they have been pleaded. Fiction of Cane River has an organic history. It is the methodical account of real tales of slaves documented in letters, bills, and diaries. All the maternal ancestors of Cane River are mothers and grandmothers of Lalita Academy, the author herself. The ultimate artistic responsibility of Academy is to bring out the interesting lives led by mothers, grandmothers, and their unflinching responsibility towards family, community, and race. Academy 2 admits that the Cane River contains historical evidence which are actually fictionalized for the creative purpose. Meanwhile, Chatham is not withdrawn from disclosing certain racial truths regarding their lineage located at the Cane River, Louisiana. Bleaching the line is a kind of a cultural practice that's followed in their community. This cultural practice has no connection with their black roots. However, it has an intention of camouflaging the real physicality to achieve certain purpose of life. Cane River spans from early spirit periods to the civil rights time. The life of great-grandmother Elizabeth, grandmother Susetta, mother Philomena, and Dr. Emily have interned with the history of their lineage. They are all slaves living at the command and mercy of slave owners, and their lives are subjected to the unpredictability. Instead of accepting it as their concrete reality, they exhibit exemplary courage and faith in their womanhood to build a permanent nest. The threat of racism and sexism are their natural hindrances, and they have dealt it with the patience, seduction for their ultimate aim of having a family and children. The novel begins with grandmother Elizabeth and their daughter Susette. Their lives moves around the kitchen and the guest room of Durbanis, the slave owners. Meanwhile, they have to undergo racist attack from their owners, especially by the mistress of family, and sexism from the near and far relatives of Durbanis. Elizabeth is a clever mother who contains the values of Afro-American household, and it has been trained to daughter Susette as part of maternal nurturance. Aurelia says that the act of nurturance, whether it is conveyed by biological mother or another mother, bestows upon the child a loud sense of self that both shields him or her from the curse of racist and sexist culture and fortifies the child is to survive and resist racism and sexism. Dr. Society knows how to defy racism and sexism. All learnings to protect her from the surrounding evils fall in vain one day when she has been sexually assaulted by the close relative of Durbanis. She shows no defiance, though she has known that her dreams to become an ideal Christian wife and a mother for the children of a hardworking Afro-American boy belonging to Gen-Z colored libre will remain just as dreams. The thought of the baby frightened her, but it gave her comfort too. It was a concrete thing a slave can afford in their entire life. Was the only thing that belonged only to her. Here, Susie's womanhood and Elizabeth's motherhood have a testing time, but Susie's decision to be a mother of a mulatto has been supported by Elizabeth. It is what our life is, baby girl. It didn't stop me from loving those babies of mine in Virginia. It is the reflection of their values and through Afro-American ancestral teachings. Young Susita always expresses her dreams to fall in love and get married to James D. Collar Libre. As a mother is cautious about her daughter's wishes and asserts the fact that don't be so eager to judge society. You can tell how somebody else Lord is just from looking. The Lord doesn't give us more than we carry, but He is putting to the test. Moreover, Elizabeth is particular that society should not follow the color liberal ways of life as they belong to an upper category of their race. Society becomes mother at a tender age. To every astonishment, society has managed her little family with inherent skill and ease, but the fate of being sexually oppressed in the hands of a white lord becomes a nightmare, as white lords face no chance of impregnating society again and again. After each pregnancy, society climbs her steps of motherhood. She learns the practical ways of black womanhood through her motherhood, trying never to yield racism and sexism in accomplishing the maternal practices. To court, she kept the blanket around the infant. We love all these children in our family, no matter how they come to us. Society's son, uncaught, Society's son Geran and daughter Philomena become highly skilled and socially smart. Society also succeeded in finding an appropriate godmother to lead their daughter and son in the path of Christianity. As a woman, Society always believes herself as a female who could deserve to lead a better life even though she was born in a slave family. Her society aims to have a more worthy life in comparison to own mother. Our society tries to emancipate by gaining the standards of white domineering race, which gets strict warnings from her mother Elizabeth. To court, Debol and Wilson Malloy observes that daughters need their mothers to win against patriarchy and keep their original selves intact. Society's attitude is constantly monitored by Elizabeth, but Elizabeth is totally against her daughter's wishes to climb the highest steps of white race because, as of all, she should understand the fact that she is, after all, a slave. Society tries too hard to fulfill the hopes she has about herself until she has been sexually exploited again and again in the hands of white slave master. After that brutal incident, Society has kept aside all her aspirations. The child's birth, but her newly gained life as a mother has regenerated what she has kept aside for herself. The thought of baby frightened her, but it has also comforted her too. The responsibility she has taken after her motherhood underlines this fact. She has undergone immense pressure and utilized all her tactics and influence on Durbanis and her white husband Eugene Darrell to have a favorable auction for their family. She is protective towards her family and prevents its disintegration by pleading mercy and gaining favors from white masters. Her women should show the potentiality of motherhood while carrying out the most necessary and highly task of mothering practice called preservation, nurturance, and cultural bearing. Society is partially succeeded in preserving her family as she could not control the entire disintegration of a black slave family as they're all part of a slave landlords. Her son's life and daughter's life is actually secured, and she has met the custody of her children through her father's right as a white slave master. Her daughter Philomena and sister Palmer to share the same slave owner. That actually she has gained, making her daughters studying in schools, making her daughter enter into a church. This is all the great time from a slave mother. Although in this midst of this the midst of slave period. The act of unifying families by society has yielded good results. So, Sister Dr. Philomena, the third generation, also secured.
Chitra, kindly wind up in next 1 minute.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. To conclude, Elizabeth, Society, Philomena are the three generations of women belonging to the white landlord parties. It is the cultural value that they pass on to each generation that moves them together though their fate is unpredictable and their dreams are at the mercy of slave owners. Prioritizing family that has been gifted to them by known and unknown men is their maternal fulfillment. They couldn't simply dream of living under wedlock with the man of their choice. The final solution of their slave life is to have a family. It is in correlation with their maternal thinking that enables them to have maternal practices to preserve their only asset, which is family. Family has greater importance than desire for slave mothers. Cambridge established the value of family life through the lives of slaves. Meanwhile, attainment of family unity is not naturally happening in slave era and another historical period like emancipation and cultural rights. It is under the personal cost of slaves extracting one's skill and blessings to its upper limit. Mothers are the chief strategists of family making. In general, these mothers would seek advancement even in the restricted environment of slavery, but they are all great sacrifice if the same is challenging to their family plans. Cambridge is the life of a woman who are all fragile in their socio-political situation. but their motherhood and affinity for family wake them up even in absence. It's over, ma'am.
Thank you, Chitra. Thank you. It was again another interesting paper wherein you brought in the nexus of racism and sexism, and how the vulnerability of women is always, you know, it's always attacked. So again, I'll come back to your paper after all the presentations. I can see Dr. Prasenjit Panda joined. Sir, we have begun the session late, so I apologize. We'll continue this session for next 10 to like 15, 20 minutes more. Right.
Ma'am. Okay, okay,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. Actually,
Everything.
instead of 12, we began at 12:30.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. So
So,
that I'm still outside, so it will be very convenient for me that if you get late for another half an hour, so that it will be good for me
I
because I'm
I
still
have been
outside.
given I have been given the ultimatum by the organizers to wind up in 50 by 110, 115.
Okay, so 110, 115. So
Yeah.
how much time extra time you will be taking?
Sir, next 15, 20 minutes, because we have done only two presentations. There are three
Okay.
more to go.
Wonderful, wonderful. So another 15, 20 minutes. Okay,
Yeah,
fine.
yeah.
There's no issue in it.
So
No
good to
issue.
see you.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Yeah, thank
We
you,
met
thank you.
at
Nice to
New
see you.
New
Yeah, nice to see you, ma'am.
New Literaria. Yeah.
Okay, okay, okay. Okay.
Okay, sir. Okay. So on behalf of the organizers, I informed Dr. Prasanjit. All right. So next we have Kawaljit Kaur and Dr. Lakwinder Kaur, and they'll be talking on human value of modern urban India in Tasneem's novels. So the paper is co-authored. Who would be presenting?
Yes, ma'am.
Is it Lakwinder or Kawaljit? I mean, it's a co-authored, no?
Ji. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
So because the name says here Dilpreet Singh, so may I know whether you are Kawaljit Kaur or Dr. Lakwinder Kaur?
Ji. Yes, ma'am.
Ji Nam.
Kavaljit Kaur.
Okay. Over to you, Kawaljit. Please start your presentation.
Thank you, ma'am. Good afternoon to all of you. My topic is human value of modern urban area in Tasneem's novel. During the transition for primitive man to today's civilized man, man has gone through many stages. In the early days, man was deprived to all facilities, natural.
Kawaljit, you're muted. Kindly unmute yourself. Yeah. Yeah,
During
please.
the transition for primitive man to today's civilized man, man has gone through many stages. In the early days, man was deprived to all facilities. Natural phenomena were also deserted for him in those times due to the use to intellectual power. Primitive human being has raised themselves above the level of animals for the sake of self sufficiency. He know a nature of nature and used it as per his consciousness convenience, and also started using the animals on earth for subsistence. Life came to stand still due to these efforts. Human society came into being by staying close to this human group, adopting occupation according to their own interested, unable this human society to meet each other's to need. Due to this, the social person's contact with his other partners increased with the flourishing to human society and the increase in facilities. The thinking of the human being coming for different stages to development for villages to town and from town to cities has also been the path of development. Changes in time and Circumstance also gave a new direction to human consciousness. The human being living under the ruler society is followers too of the ruler value. Changes come. The human being living in today's urban culture is also eager to being a vastness in his level of consciousness in order to deal with the complex of life. A man living to today's fast past urban life may be embarrassing modern value, but he has not completely even the basic value in his subconsciousness mind. New value do not come into being by completely erasing to the old condition, but human society adopt a new vision by life while living in the background and antiquity. The same is true of contemporary literary widows, completely free from the present urban human traditional presented in them. It is not living by adopting a unique approach. These literally widows from the basic of the urban human being who is consciously attached to the traditional and is consciously following a new urban value system. Niranjan Tasneem is one of the novelists who has portrayed urban society in his novels. A study of Tasneem's entries novels reveals the fact of that in his novels he has attempted to portray urban life in the realistic way. Today's urban middle class is freeing itself from the grip of the price fixed permanently by society. In rural life, culture beliefs are still changed, and every action is examined by a community of censor. While the man living in the urban way of life, sin and emerging from the demand of ritual, he is also imagining the price management set by society on the basis of logic. Niranjan Tasneem has also portrayed this conscious urban middle class in most of the works during his lifetime of traveling in urban society. The novelist modern his experience into novel works with her insights into the life sciences of urban society. Tasneem has, with the help of her artistic insights, realistically experienced of life vision and way of life of urban society. Tasneem's novels, while giving to uh, practical presentation of the life of characters living in urban middle class, bring of the fore the fact that according to today's urban life, of course these presentations also become part of his psyche while asleep, but consciously he puts a culture value in the background, giving more important of his physical and emotional needs. Their outlook on life is more important of them. This consciousness is shaped by self-determined value. That is why they value self-determined life arrangement and life accordingly in their lives in society. Their reality of today's lifestyle is that today's citizen adapts his life to a self-determined outlook and self-determined cost management. The urban society portrayed in these novels does not follow to rigid norms like the rural society, but everybody living in this urban society, the individual follows the cost management in way of life according to the individual consciousness vision. In Niranjan Tasneem novels, the consciousness of the character seems to have been allied with his modern pricing system due to the effect of the changed urban way to of life. Due to the influence of higher education and some similar economic condition, these characters perfect person's satisfaction to the pursuit of a stabilized value. Flexible urban pricing provide these actors with the ample opportunity to purchase their appreciations. The consciousness to the characters in Ranjan Tasneem's early novel Parshami seeks to emerge from the shadows of traditional prices and adapt to the modern urban pricing system. The consciousness of a character like Raminder and Mrs. Nixon in urban society is fully is favor of urban pricing. These characters are free from the nation that marriage is a sacred bond. They do not divide their characters into good, bad, right, and wrong. Only the fulfillment of their desires is rights to them. That is the basic of their satisfaction. Raminder needs the company of the company of his girlfriend Jasbir, but he finds it unnecessary of follow the social norms. Being a followers of modern thinking, he is not even ready to form a relationship with Jasbir's family. He wanted Jasbir's to be his, but he did not want to belong to their house. This thing did not suit his nature. At times he even thought that only in a romantic atmosphere and did Jasbir find him so full and so attractive? After he will have everything, but he used to use for the beginning. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, thank you, Kamaljeet. This was something new that we discussed in post-colonial studies, the impact of modernization on urban men. Thank you. I invite the fourth presenter, T.S. Srikala. Her topic is Modern and Postmodern Attitude of Preeti Sharma Shenoy's 100 Little Flames. Srikala?
Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon to you all. I am Srekala, research scholar, Anivelangani College, Tolavatam, and under the guidance of Dr. J. Sulatha, ma'am, Associate Professor and Research Supervisor, Department of English, Anivelangani College, Tolavatam. My paper title is Modern and Postmodern Attitude of Preeti Shenoy's 100 Little Flames. The author of Preeti Shenoy is remarkable for her acute portrayal of characters. The title of the novel that is taken up for investigation is highly suggestive. A flame cannot brighten up or lead anyone's life or path, but when many flames are put together, it becomes a torch to walk with confidence even in darkness. The protagonist, Ian, is humble in his desire and aim. His father prods him often to attain greater heights in his career. Ian is neither specified to achieve his goal nor passionate to set his goal. The generation gap between Ian and his father is far wide, whereas his wavelength accurately accessing situations syncs with his grandfather. Ian is able to survive with his grandfather but not with his father. It is not the age that brings difference between father and son. The egoistic class and the individual pride stick fast to the prejudice that widen the gap in the relationship among fathers and sons. This paper investigates the background of the gap and how it is resolved in the novel chosen. Preeti Shenoy in her novel "100 Little Flames" narrates the story of an old man, Gopal, whose 100 little flames are put out by his progenies. The crushed and collapsed soul of Gopal longs for a hold. Generation gap exists between his kids and him, bring in multiple disruption in his life. Gopal belongs to baby boomers generation, children born between 1945 and 1964. His progenies belong to Generation X, 1965 to 1980, and their descendant belongs to Generation Y, 1981 to 1995. Generation Z belongs to the period between 1996 to the present. Generation Z is the primary user of mobile from
Shrikala, you are muted. Kindly unmute yourself.
Yes,
Yeah,
ma'am.
yeah.
Yes.
Please.
Okay. However, these charts brings disruption in the relationship. This paper investigates the generation gap that prevails among the main characters Gopal, Jairaj, Saila, and Ayan. Then it will also discuss the reasons for generation.
Once again, it's muted. Yeah.
Ayan, the protagonist of the novel, does not have any wish on his.
Ma'am, kindly check your device.
Okay, ma'am.
Yeah. Again and again, it's getting muted.
Yeah. Phone calls is. And then it will come also discuss the reason for generation gap inconsistency that sprout from the gap, aims to find out whether any possibility to overcome or bridge the gap. And Ian, the protagonist of the novel, does not have any wish on his own. He feels like a puppet in his father's hand. Though he is an obliging son, he is enforced to execute certain wishes of his father, which he dislikes to the core. Ian's stay at Take Madam in Kerala has changed his perspective about life. He agrees with his grandfather in many of his opinions. He is able to identify passion and genuineness of his grandfather's platonic love that exists between his grandfather and his ex-beloved.
Madam Shrikala.
Yes, ma'am. Altogether, Ian relieves himself from the monotony of mundane world.
Ma'am, please, I don't know what's happening with your device.
Yes, ma'am, it's off.
I don't know what's happening.
Okay, ma'am. The phone calls is.
All right. Okay.
Ian's grandfather is not a pure modern. For instance, his affinity towards his soil, which has not felt the transformation or influence of technology, is very strong. But when his grandson depends on technology, he remains quiet and does not interrupt in his ways. Fragmentation is prominent in both modernism and postmodernism, but that is accepted in different modes, as pointed out by Jeremy Hawthorne in his concise glossary of literary theory. The modernist features in such a way to us to register a deep nostalgia for an earlier age when faith was full and authority intact. Ian's grandfather is very nostalgic. He refuses to accept transformation. He adheres to meta narratives. Postmoderns do not adhere to grand narratives. There is a tone of lament, pessimism, and despair about the world which finds its appropriate representation in these fractured art forms. For the postmodernist, by contrast, fragmentation is an accelerating, liberating phenomenon escape from the claustrophobic embrace of fixed system of beliefs. This is evident in the life of Ian. Everything is lost for Ian at one juncture. His life becomes fragmented, desperate in his love and career. He is hopeful to pursue his life with confidence. He does not carry over his dejection after his failure. He adapts to the new environment in Take Madam. Besides, he maintains good rapport with his grandfather. Ian is his grandfather's ardent aide. And distraction in domestic life. Gopal denies staying with his son who lives abroad. Take Madam is the palatial ancestral home of Gopal Sangar and his siblings lived together in a joint family. Little by little, the giant family had disintegrated with the members moving away to different cities to make a living. Kobal's son Jairaj plans to sell their ancestral home and ask his father to stay with him in Bahrain. Kobal contents his son plan, saying, "People like to live in matchboxes and where there is not even a piece of land." Kobal is for minimalism, and he has grudges towards his son who monetary development and socio-economic status. His son and daughter never value their souls, and Kobal finds a pot of gold in the form of his grandson, who is able to sympathize him, unlike his son. Ian realizes his grandfather's affinity towards his place. Ian's father defends his on the ground that who is going to live in the huge house after him. His father's words fall like a stab to Ian. What Jairaj is unable to cope with realized by Ian, he immediately thinks of his grandfather's plight once the home is sold. Ian knows that his father is very practical. Simultaneously, he is able to sense that selling take modem is equal to that of uprooting his grandfather from a place to which he affixes to the core. Ian's sadness is profound. This incident highlights that age is not a barrier for generation gap. What a son fails to understand understood by a grandson. In Indian context, though
Ma'am,
it is
kindly wind up in
primarily a
next.
patriarchal setup
Ma'am,
in the society, and father and son relationship does not exist smoothly in majority of the cases. Most of them vie with one another, and in the case of Kobal, his son and daughter fail to realize him. Technology strengthens
ma'am, kindly
relationship.
wind up.
It
Ma'am,
is
kindly.
a common expectation of the parent to seek his progenies occasionally. Kobal's children are against his expectation. Both of them stay away from him. They never care to visit him. Phone calls and Skype
Madam
connect them,
Shrikala,
and that's
Madam
true for
Shrikala,
their material benefit in the
not
view
listening.
of Kobal, and who is stuck by traditional codes and conduct, says, yes, Jairaj has
Oh, how was she removed from the meeting? I don't know. Organizer Cheryl, can you help? She was continuing, but she was not able to hear me. And I
Suddenly her call got disconnected. I'm not sure about it.
okay. Just quickly want to check whether the last presenter has joined because I saw Charlie C joining um, the meeting. Charlie C, the last presenter. Do we have? I did see at some point of time a Charlie C joining the meeting. So does that mean we are done with the session, Cheryl?
Yes, ma'am.
Shirley?
Yes,
I'm so sorry I
you can move
mispronounced your
on.
name. Okay. So now I think we can wind up. First of all, I would like to ask the presenters if they have any questions, any queries, anything to ask from the paper presenters. Anyone? Most welcome to ask. I don't see any question in the chat box also, Shirley.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I don't think that they are interested to ask any question. I'll just quickly give a some summary and a gist of the papers. Lisa Pavitran, she talked about Nunakul and very interesting how nature and culture, they are not two entities, especially in the lives of or in the cultures of the non Westerners, let's put, or the erstwhile colonized, and she talked about the Aborigines and how whenever they talk about I, they actually mean the we, and it is not just a piece of land, but land for them means identity. So it was very interesting to listen to that paper. Chitra Soman again talked about Black motherhood. And while listening to her paper, I was reminded of the stolen generation of Australia, where something similar happened with the Aborigines mothers when their children were taken away, forcibly taken away by the white fathers. And what all happened thereafter is history. And so listening to the black mothers in the Afro-American mothers in America, we can relate the pain of the Aborigine mothers. Kawaljeet Kaur talked about a very different topic. Usually, we miss out on these issues when we discuss post-colonial discourse. She talked about the impact of modernism on urban man, and how the human values, they are kind of getting diluted, and the human beings in the urban spaces are basically living on the hyphens. They are hanging in between tradition and modernity. Shrikala continued the same topic in her paper when she talked about the generation gaps. She talked about urban modern and postmodern conflict, and she talked about fragmentation and fissured identities. And interestingly, she brought in the three generations, and very nicely she elaborated on you know the technology, the influence of technology, and ideological differences in these generation gaps in different generations. So overall, it was a nice session with varied papers on varied themes. So thank you, Shirley, and the organizers.